coming out this evening. I apologize, we got a little bit of a later start than I had hoped, but we've got the meeting. It was we'll be make sure that we're done by 7:30 at the latest. For those of you who are unaware of who I might be, my name is Paul Logue. I'm the planner for the city of Athens. What we're here tonight to talk about is a new strategic economic and local design plan called the Essence of Athens. This is a project that we've been working on for about a year and a half. I think we started in May of 2013, and now we're into September of 2014. We had a document published a few months ago, or about a month ago. Several of you I can see in the room have it. We may have a few available copies at the end of the meeting for people who don't have it. It's also available online on the city's website and on a website called issuu.com, ISSUU.com. And if you search for Essence of Athens, you'll be able to find it there. But without further ado or introduction, I would like to just get started on discussing the plan. What I'm going to do tonight is talk about the plan, the planning process, the philosophy and the theories behind the plan, and then also some of the implementation and the recommendations from the plan. I've got about 36 or 40 slides. The first question some of you may have on your minds, if you haven't had a chance to read the plan yet or look through it, is what is the Essence of Athens plan? What it is, it's a way to make sure that Athens continues to be defined by key elements that make Athens a wonderful, interesting, and rare place. It's also a topical update of the city's comprehensive plan, specifically a few chapters in there relating to local attitudes and planning themes, and land use and urban design sections. The plan is also a strategy to address ways to ensure that Athens is not just a collection of nice or better places, but truly Athens places. What we want to focus on here is how can we make sure that the community of Athens remains a unique place into the future. We want to keep Athens, Athens. Okay, so who is the plan for? The city of Athens, it's for the city administration and city departments to help with them while they're doing planning for major capital projects, building a swimming pool perhaps, doing any road improvements, doing a wastewater treatment plant, doing improvements to City Hall or Arts West or any of our other facilities around town, possibly our community parks or our trail system. It's also for developers that are considering new projects in the city so that we can convey to them what we think really matters about Athens, and that we would like to see design, we would like to see products and projects that reflect the community and respect our history, respect our culture, so we don't just get cookie cutter buildings that look like every place else in the U.S. We do have a lot of franchises that come into town and chain restaurants. Those are all well and good. I know people like them, and that's fine. But it would be nice if we had restaurants of that nature that looked different in Athens than they looked everywhere else in the U.S. So they're not just doing Control-C, Control-V with their blueprints and submitting them to Athens like they do every other community. It's also for local business owners who are thinking about redesigning their places of business. The plan, and we've got some backing research to show that when you do things at a local level and when you take time to make things unique, it does add value to your investment, and it does build on the local economy. As well for homes, same thing with businesses, same thing with new construction. Getting homes, getting things of that nature that are unique to our community, so we're not seeing cookie cutter homes and suburban tract style homes that look the same in Athens as they do everywhere else in the world. And therefore, I would say you or anyone else who's interested in encouraging local development that reflects the Athens people, history, culture, art, and the environment. Now, how to use the material. We want you to understand the meaning and the intent of the plan and how it can improve your project. We'd ideally like people to be able to glean design ideas from the Showcase and Celebrate section to discover and understand what we're calling the Athens design DNA, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. We'd also like you to learn how to take action in the Reinforcing Our Culture section, and then we want you to have fun with it. This project is meant to inspire, it is meant to to get your creative juices flowing. It's not supposed to be a rigid set of rules as to what you can or can't do. It's really just about taking ideas, a little bit more detail about what you might do, and thinking about how that could improve the community around you and make it your own, but also make it everybody's. Okay, now the plan it's rooted in what's called the economy of uniqueness. Is anybody familiar with that? Anybody heard of that before? The World Bank has what they call urban development series of white papers and research documents that they've put together over the years. The economy of uniqueness one is about 350 pages of a lot of data, international research on what works in communities all over the world. The threads are pretty much there. In a nutshell, what it says is that cities that embrace a visible, definable, and representative cultural heritage are more economically healthy than those that ignore their unique qualities. That goes for everywhere in the United States, everywhere in the world. If you're unique, if you respect your community, if you respect your culture, your heritage, and what you are, you're going to do better than everybody else. We're all in the city of Athens, our local businesses, our realtors, our university, we're all in competition. So how do we make ourselves better? How do we get money to come to Athens? How do we get tourism to come to Athens? How do we get the best students, the best faculty, the best planners, the best mayors, the best councilmen? How do we get all these people to come to Athens? What draws somebody here? What makes that person want to come here? It's got to be what makes us different. It has to be what stands us apart, that stands us out from the rest of the world, because we are in competition. Second part is what's called the artistic dividend. Here's a white paper on that. There's several more that are involved with that. It's written by a woman named Anna Markison and David King. Very interesting. This is a short one. It's only about 25 pages, but it's also very rooted in data. What it says is that there's the value added to local and regional economies through artistic work. Basically, it's figured out a formula that the more artistic work you have in your community, the more nonprofits that are focused on arts, whether it be heritage, whether it be culture, whether it be quilts and plays and what Passion Works does, the more of that stuff you have and the more you support it, the more you are adding to your local economy. And finally, in the city of Athens, in 2010, we did a big study. I know a few of you were involved. It's called the ANEP4 study. Unfortunately, Bob Winters was the spearhead for this, and Bob passed away a few weeks ago. But what the ANEP4 study, that's the Arts and Economic Prosperity 4 study, what that tells us is that investments in the local arts means jobs and it means money to our economy. We have, in 2010, local nonprofit arts and culture organizations provided 739 full-time equivalent jobs in Athens County. If you took all of those local nonprofit area arts organizations and looked at them as one, they would be the fourth or the fifth largest employer in our county. That's saying something. Finally, or no, not finally, but two more things. One is that building is branding. You can brand your community, you can put a slogan on a business card, you can make a nice logo, and you can sell your community that way. That logo might not actually be the truth as to what goes on in your community. You can also brand by showing what you do, by your built environment, by what people see when they come to your town. That first impression, that second impression, do they want to come back here? Do they want to live here? Do they feel like that branding is true? So if you do it through your building and by your design standards, yes, you're going to be able to verify that to anybody. And lastly, we have what I'd like to call the power of our story. Athens has a very rich history, very powerful story, exciting community, long history, a lot of things going on in Southeast Ohio, a lot of things that happen in Athens. We are a known community. You say to somebody you're from Athens, Ohio, I mean, it's a town of 25,000 people where 22,000 are students. So if you say you're from Athens, Ohio, people know right where you're talking about. It can be from anywhere in the Midwest or anywhere in the U.S. People know Athens. There's not too many 25,000 population communities in Ohio that can say that. Or they're known for something that you might not want to be known for. We don't have that, thank goodness. Okay, so I know I said about a minute and a half for each slide, and that was probably about 5 or 10, so I apologize for that. All right, so the goals of the plan, pretty simple, I think. Explain the Athens-specific design inspirations to showcase and celebrate the uniqueness of our community. Try to establish a culture of high expectations for Athens-inspired design in order to reinforce that culture. To me, that expectation, we're trying to establish that with potentially people who are coming to the city to build something or filing a permit, that we have an opportunity to discuss these ideas with them and encourage something, make it optional, but also at the same time try to encourage it and say that this is really what we expect and this is what we think works. And we think it has benefits for everybody. And additionally, encourage a widespread and increased celebration of Athens so we can better share our story with the world. Again, we're in competition and people already know us. So we've got a story to tell and people actually want to hear it, I think. Okay. Process, this is the boring stuff. I started this, I was working with Kyle Ezel. He is a faculty member at Ohio State University's City and Regional Planning Department. He is also the principal for a planning consulting firm called Designing Local. He should be here momentarily. I think he was running late from class in Columbus. But Kyle and I started meeting back in about April or March of last year, talking about some ideas. We were kind of coming around to the same ideas. So we decided, well, let's work together on this. Let's try some new things and see what works. The product we have here and the plan that we've drafted, this is a concept that focusing on unique local design elements has, to my knowledge, never really been attempted at this level for a community in the U.S. So this is really groundbreaking stuff. It is creative placemaking. People are probably familiar with that term. But it's taking creative placemaking and really diving down into your culture to figure out what works and how do you do it. So we did some pre-planning, then we had a public meeting. Several of you, probably half, were there. We did some homework assignments for participants. What we challenged everybody to do is take photographs of what they thought was the essence of Athens, what they thought defined our community, and what made us different. That could be anything. We had photographs, and I'll show you a few here in a minute. But we had about 200 photographs that were submitted. We had emails from people. We had essays. I think I have a poem or two that people gave me that they wrote. Really fun, really interesting stuff. We did that for about a month and a half. We tried to get all this input from the community. Then we formed an ad hoc committee. There's several of you are in the room right now. I think we had 7 or 8 people on the ad hoc committee. We took all that information and tried to distill it down to its essence to figure out what does make Athens different from everywhere else and what does make us special or what makes us unique or what defines us. Wasn't the easiest thing to figure out, but we think we've got a pretty good idea of that. From there, we did a lot of writing, designing, photographing, editing, rewriting, etc. Then we published the document, which several of you have, and then that leads us to tonight. Just some examples. These were images that were provided to us through the process of things that people said were that essence of Athens. Trees, bricks, Ohio University, a farmer's market, Passion Works flowers, Patty's dinosaurs, the window treatments at the ridges, music, etc. We had things like this. You know, interesting stuff, but how do you define your culture based on the Marching 110? I do love that picture, though. I love the 110 as well. They certainly do make up part of our community. A lot of different ideas, a lot of different interesting things that really challenged us to figure out what that essence is. We came down to a list of things we think defines Athens. We called it the Athens DNA, or the Athens design DNA. We have our hills, our river, nature, our music, our brick and stone, our youthful outlook, what was defined as our little bigness. And I think what that means is we've got a small town of 25,000 people, but we have high art. We've got a lot of culture that you don't find in communities of this size. And so we also, and because we have such an international imprint from the university, that we've got a lot of people from all over the world in our community. So it really does kind of stand us out. We also have the inventive spirit, our accepting attitudes, and our colors, our vibrant colors. Then we started working on, we had a interior design student from OU named Taylor Welch. He just graduated, but he was fantastic. Taylor worked with us to try to take some of that DNA and figure out how can we actually bring that into our built environment. And that was the real challenge, and that's what we wanted to get out of this. You think about that. How do you take something from that means Athens and make it into something unique that you can't see anywhere else? So we were saying to ourselves, how do you make an Athens bike rack? How do you make an intersection in the city of Athens that can be nowhere else in the world? How do you get somebody to take a picture of a trash can and say, look at this amazing trash can. I've never seen this anywhere else in the world. And I'm going to put that on Twitter, and I'm going to put that on Facebook, and I'm going to take a picture of that bike rack, and I'm going to tell everybody, look at this crazy thing I saw in Athens. And if anybody wanted to copy that idea or that look, they can't do it because it's so rooted in us that to do it would be clear stealing. Okay? So that's what we did, and that's what Taylor started working on for us, was kind of putting what we called napkin sketches. Taylor used few of you may be aware of these, but in the late 70s, there was a series of plans called Athens, Ohio Town Hill, Market Lanes, and Future City that were done in collaboration with the city and the university. Really fantastic sketch work, pen and ink stuff was done in here. I sat down with Taylor one day and I said, what we'd like to see are some sketches that look like this. And so he went, this is from the Market Lane study, and then he started doing this stuff. So we wanted to get a plan that kind of was rooted back into our history, but also reflected on some of the ideas that were boiling up generations ago. There's a lot more that Taylor did that isn't in the book, but we also have a lot of other ideas that didn't make it into the book too. Not that they're bad, but we ran into some printing costs, and we really wanted to just kind of get a lot of ideas out there. Okay, so we went through all of that stuff. And we started writing, we started coming up with Kyle Ezel, that's him right here. He's the gentleman I mentioned earlier. Kyle was the one who really did the heavy lifting of writing and doing a lot of layout work and making sure that this thing really worked for us. It's a terrific plan. The keys to this are what we're calling the reinforcing Athens. What we want to do is make sure that into the future we're doing things that retain Athens' uniqueness, retain our spirit, and retain our culture. It's not easy to do. Communities get diluted. They lose that culture over time. You get developers who don't care, who are only focused on making money, and so that they may not be as interested in the community, or you get people from outside your community that want to do business, and they too are not so interested in making sure that they're respecting their community. So you've got to really protect that. We wanted to reinforce it. We also didn't want to make a plan that was telling everybody else in the world what to do without saying the city should be doing things as well. We have a lot of control over our rights of ways. We've got streets and sidewalks and bike paths and city parks. We've got a lot of places, and we have a lot of buildings like this one. We've got places where we can make an impact and we can showcase our community, and hopefully some of that information or that gets sent back to other people, other private property owners and other developers, so that they too want to get invested in this. So we really focused a lot on things that the city can actually do based on capital investments that we may make. I'd like to give you a few examples kind of our process. And again, here's what we're talking about, the bike rack. These are what you see in Athens. We typically call them cactus bike racks. It might work very well in Arizona. It might even be the essence of Tempe, Arizona, or somewhere. I don't know. But you can see this bike rack all over the place, and I have seen it in other communities. You start looking at this stuff enough, you're going to see the same trash can on Court Street. You'll see it in movies, from movie sets that are filmed in Cleveland and Pittsburgh and New York and LA. You'll see this stuff all over the place. You'll see the same trash cans, the same bike racks, the same everything. It's nice stuff and it works, but it's not unique and it's not necessarily interesting. And a lot of times you miss it because you forget that it's even on the, it just blends right in. Okay, so with the bike racks, we kind of identified that there's reasons why you might want to work on something like this. We have a vibrant bicycling community and culture. Our current bike racks, anecdotally, we've been told that people don't see them. They become invisible. Our bike racks are a catalog product. Like I said, you can order them online and have them delivered to your home. We also think that there's an opportunity exists to have bike racks in Athens that can't be duplicated anywhere because they truly reflect and celebrate our community. So we started looking at some ideas, and this is kind of the process we went through. We had somebody suggested, bricks are part of our essence. We probably had about 50 pictures of bricks. No denying that Athens block is part of what makes us interesting. We started looking at what other communities did, and you can see there's two. The bottom left-hand corner, if you can't see that, those are eyeglasses. I think that's a mock-up that the city of Columbus was looking at. Pretty interesting. The one in the middle there as well. That's a bike rack made by a local artist. I think somewhere in California. Interesting stuff, but you can do it anywhere. There's nothing unique about those eyeglasses per se. They're interesting, they're cool, but do they really represent Athens, or do they represent Columbus? I was staring at that image last week, and is anybody familiar with the late humorist James Thurber? All I kept thinking of is maybe those are James Thurber's glasses, because he had glasses that were round like that. So I thought maybe it was a tribute to James Thurber, which would be really cool. But so we went from looking at these ideas, and then we started talking about, well, how can we integrate some of this stuff into our make a bike rack? This right here, these are mock-ups that are from the ridges, the windows at the ridges. You take something that's been in Athens since the 1860s, you bring it down to Court Street, you bring it to the community center. Now you're telling a story about the history of the Athens Insane Asylum. You're telling a history about the growth of our community and all that good stuff. So we got to that idea. Then we started thinking a little bit further. John Leffelholtz, from our ad hoc committee, he did some of these mock-ups for us that included the Athens block. And then finally we got into some detail like this, where we could have a bike rack that looks like an Athens block brick. And again, that way, if we can get stuff like this in our community, nobody can copy it, because it can only be an Athens bike rack. Additionally, we looked at, and I have a few more of these, and I apologize if I'm talking too long. The Athens City Parking Garage. Why might we look at the Athens City Parking Garage? Well, for one, it's the largest structure in the uptown area. It's a very heavily used and important part of our uptown business and activity. It's got a very hard, harsh, brutalist design that doesn't fit in exactly right with historic uptown Athens, in my opinion. You could maybe argue from an architectural standpoint that it is an interesting example of brutalist architecture. Not the most popular type of architecture anymore. It also has this very hard sidewalk treatment right there. Not the most inviting or comfortable or interesting part to walk in uptown. So we started looking at, ideas for what could you do with a gigantic parking garage. And we started looking at some of the easy ones that have been done. The one on the top left, you're just putting like grates to kind of cover it up, but also to give some variety to your design. There's a lot of, you'll see that on a lot of different parking garages. The one in the middle, you've got some interesting color from some, looks like some lights to really light it up or make it pop in the evenings. And then the bottom left hand there, you've got some really interesting greenscape. We started really talking about greenscape for a while, and then we realized that if you look at the main facade, that's actually a north-facing wall. And so there's not much we can do because there's a very limited lack of, or limited sunlight there. So we started talking a little bit more about it. The first one of the ideas we came up with was to paint flowers or greenscape all over it. The second one was to use parking in all these different languages to celebrate the international culture of Athens. We started looking at what is this going to cost in paint and how do you maintain that? Is it going to get drab really quick? We didn't know, but we thought maybe it would. The paint would fade, and then we'd have something that would look maybe even worse than what we have today. Then we started looking into a little bit more detail, thinking a little bit deeper, taking some of those color elements that we see around town. This was inspired by the Passionworks flower. And the recommendations in the plan are to basically use the same process that you have with the Passionworks flower. You take gigantic sheets of metal, recycled material, just like they use right now, paint it all up, and instead of cutting it into petals, cut it into strips, and then you do some cladding to it. And you can install something like this on the building. It's structurally sound. It should work. It's recyclable. It's using local materials. It's bringing in local artists. And then you have something that people really might want to park in. Might feel a little bit safer in there. Might feel a little bit brighter, more interesting. Might draw you to it. You could also, if this is too much, we could just focus on the ground level and do something right down there. Same type of idea. To make the sidewalk and that stretch a little bit more pleasant. Another example, Athens alleys. I was actually shocked at how many people suggested that alleys were one of the unique things or one of the essences of Athens. I never really considered that, although I use those alleys for shortcuts just like everybody else. They can be really interesting in the daylight. They're fun to explore, I guess. We have a 1970s plan called the Market Lanes that is all about how we can use these alleys and bring people into them, bring businesses into them, and make them feel almost like an old European city. There's a lot of really interesting ideas in there. Along with the alleys, we had several people who just talked about, love of Athens and how people really feel they have a relationship with this community and they're really drawn to it. Everybody says they love Athens, I think. At least I do. And I hear that all the time. We started exploring that idea of love a little bit more, and somebody said, well, Tim Pfaff, I don't think that Tim's here this evening, but he pointed out, well, it's Court Street, and you have all these people who met and fell in love on Court Street. And so it's called Court Street because there's a courthouse, but it's also where people court. And so you've got kind of two layers to what that street actually means and what happens there. And so how can we kind of convey that love of Athens, but also that love of what all the people who fell in love uptown, got married and started families. We really kicked this one around for a while. We settled on one that's been tried and true in a few other places. You've probably seen them, the Locks of Love, that there's a bridge in Paris, and I think Dublin, Ireland has it, and a handful of other communities have it. You have chain link fencing. People get padlocks or people get kryptonite locks or whatever, inscribe their names or their wedding date or the day they met, and then they put them on these bridges or they put them wherever, and then they just stay there. How can we do something like that similar in Athens? And again, we started going back to that Market Lane plan from the 1970s. talking about opening up these alleys and getting people in to explore them. Through the napkin sketches, we looked at, you can't see this very well in here, but this has a series of like Chinese lanterns running through it. We talked about painting them up with different flowers or putting large passionworks flowers on them. And then what we kind of got back to was that we thought the locks worked really well. And so it's, you see this, we've got chain links here, and then it's mounted to the wall. People can come in here, they can put their they can put their locks up there. They can leave behind those memories when they come back for homecoming or for the football game or for Brew Week or anything like that. Encourages people to come back to our community who may not have been here in a very long time. Bring their children back. Take them to their old haunts and have a great weekend. Another example that we did, we got into these crosswalks. Athens has a very high percentage of pedestrians, one of the highest in the U.S. I know there's the Athens News just did a report on this, and our bicycle and pedestrian plan also talks about this. On a daily basis, about 40% of our community gets around on foot. If you look at the studies of communities that do that, it's almost always college towns. I think we're number 2 in the U.S. based on 2000 census. Most recent study, I think, said we're like 8th in the country. That's a lot of people walking everywhere every day. We've got thousands of people walking these streets. We got to this idea that crossing the street, it shouldn't just be the routine way to get from place to place, but we can make it an act of celebration of being a pedestrian in our city. And if we're doing good design and we're doing interesting things, that might encourage people to walk. If we've got interesting crosswalks, it might encourage people to cross at the crosswalks instead of jaywalking. A lot of different reasons why you might want to do that. And again, how do you get somebody to take a picture of a crosswalk and then share that with people? So we looked at that. We looked at a whole bunch of different ideas and some things that other communities did, different ways to explore it. We had several ideas here. These are, if you can't see, these are that ridges motif again. A few different color ideas. We looked at coloring or painting the brick in different ways to make them really interesting. Also, you could do those colors to differentiate amongst northeast, south, and west, and you could tie that in with our streetscape and with our signage plans. And then we came into some more basic ideas using that ridges motif. And that is what we settled on as being a best practice or a best idea. However, because the plan is all about ideas, we're not saying that any of these is the right one. It's more about what do we think is the best way to approach it. And then we also have our stairways. This ties in with those crosswalks again and all the people that walk around this town. I think we have 5 in Athens right now. They're heavily used shortcuts. If those stairways didn't exist for a lot of people, they might choose to drive instead of walk. They can shave 3 to 5 minutes off a walk. I know I used to live right by some, and when those came in, my morning walk to City Hall went from, I think, 12 minutes down to 8 minutes. That was a big difference for me, even a half a cup of coffee at home before I left. So it was a huge improvement to my morning. We also settled on that they're a blank canvas. This is Fort Street right here. Sometimes it gets some graffiti on it. Sometimes things happen, that you don't want to happen, and then you got to go out and you got to get somebody to paint over it. When you do creative things like that are less likely to get graffiti. They're less likely to get tagged. People respect them a little bit more. There's also a long history of using public stairs and being creative with them to encourage people to explore them and people to use them. So we looked at some ideas like this. We've got some SketchUp plans here. This was trying to be clever. It says like, just keep climbing. You're almost there. I think maybe it might say like 32 more to go. Stuff like that, so that you kind of have a gauge for how far you're going. And then we did a little bit more mock-up work and came up with ideas like this. Gateways that tell you where you're going. This idea here, you've got the Athens block bike racks. Same with this one. You can't see it very well from the image, but the concept was that if you're walking towards it, you can't see what it says, but you can tell it looks, it's like abstract colors. And then as you get right in front of it, it would say Fairview Avenue. So that would tell you that if you take those steps, you'll get up to Fairview. Now, I have a lot more of this stuff, but I didn't want to bore you with the whole process over and over again. So I just want to show you a few more ideas that we had. Traffic boxes. These guys are all over town. They're a blank canvas. Communities have done this all over the place. These are images that were provided by the Dairy Barn from local artists. We could relatively cheap get wraps for these things. You'll see a lot less stickers and a lot less tags go up on them. You can also let people know that there's local art exhibits at Arts West, or at the Kennedy, or at the Dairy Barn, or another gallery. Who knows, something else might come along. Okay, so that we talked a lot about the potential public projects. The plan also looks into private projects and ideas that people might want to have. Like I said earlier, the plan is not telling somebody what to do. It's trying to encourage people to think a little bit more about what they're doing, and maybe just get into a little bit more detail about what they want to do, and think about how that might be a benefit both to them and to the public. We think that if you get inspired by this plan, you're going to add to the vitality of the community. You'll help to continue to ensure that Athens is a unique and economically competitive place, and that will continue to be a community of choice. So we have just a few examples. Homes and yards, it's something we all have to deal with. Athens is interesting in a lot of ways with the way the city was built and the way it grew. We don't have a real rigid form of what a house should look like. It's not all Victorians, it's not all brick, it's not all arts and crafts. It's because the city developed over many years, especially as Ohio University grew. Our housing also developed, so we have housing of all different phases. We also have a lot of interesting homes, a lot of color. We said Athens yards can be as free-thinking as the people who tend to them, and we've got a lot of free-thinking people in this community. You can use your home, you can use your landscaping as an opportunity to express yourself, to be quirky, to let people kind of know where you're coming from. We think that if you have an Athens that's full of these brightly colored homes, if it's full of interesting yards and landscaping, you're going to help tell our story, and you're going to help us make us stand out again. Here's just some stuff that's already in town. Mayor Weil's house, in case anybody's wondering why I'm pointing at that.
You get pizza there.
You just tell people the Purple House like that, right?
3 Mary Street Purple.
There you go. Again, it's not saying you should do this, but it's saying if you want to do this, it's okay to do it. Don't feel like don't feel like you're going to be frowned upon. Just if you want to do it, go right ahead and do it.
Except if I start losing my pizza because you have a purple house.
Yeah. Don't copy the mayor's design scheme there. The Athens block. I mean, how many of us have Athens block in our landscaping? I know I do. How many people have ever looked when a home is for sale in Athens and you get on the realtors' websites? If there's a patio with Athens block on, even if it's 10 pavers, that's on their website. And people say, oh, it's got the block. I want to live there. Do more of that type of stuff. A few other ideas we looked at that we didn't get into really deep discovery in the plan, but we think could really work. Street lights that also tie in with that type of those ridges motif, or something else about our community. Athens block, they don't make it anymore, so there's not, the limited quantity. What we were talking about with our public works director was when we're doing new sidewalk projects, you've got to pour 4 feet of concrete. The city does have a stash of Athens block. Rather than put in 4 feet of poured concrete, for each 4 feet you put in one single Athens block. So everywhere you walk in Athens, you're reminded that you're in Athens. You've got a sidewalk that nobody else can duplicate. Make it unique. These, I'm sure people are familiar with some of these obelisks. They used to be everywhere in town. There's still a handful left. You can bring those back, or you can do something stylized similar to them. Put more information on it. Tell them the direction that they're traveling. Tell you from what intersection you are. How long does it take to walk from there to College Green? How long does it take to get to the bike path? What's the most efficient route to get to the bike path from where you are, and how long will it take you to get there? You can do that almost everywhere in this town, and it'll encourage people to walk. It'll encourage people to do things besides drive their vehicle. Sidewalks. It's a blank slate. The idea we came up with for that one, there's all these stories in Athens, and there's all these different histories because you have all these college students who come and go, and they remember Athens as it was when they came here from 1993 to 1997, or from 1982 to 1987. You get the picture. Then they come back here 5 or 10 years later, and everything's different. And they say, well, this isn't how it used to be. But everybody's history is different based on when they showed up in this town, because most of us aren't from here. So what we'd like to do, or what we want to see, are you could take the names of all the old haunts, all the old bars and restaurants and all the old sites uptown, and you can put the name of them right into the concrete. So when you get an alumni who graduated in 1978 and they used to hang out at Swanky's, I'm not looking at you, Mayor Weil, but they can stand there and say, hey, this is where Swanky's was. I remember Swanky's, and tell their kids about it. Take a picture of that sidewalk. Share that with their alumni friends from those years from Facebook, or email it to them. Those people are going to come back here. They're going to want to spend their money and stay in our hotels and enjoy Athens again. Easy stuff that we can do that's going to make our sidewalk like no other sidewalk in the world. Okay. So let's talk about realizing the plan. There's a whole bunch of great ideas in there, I think. There's a lot of stuff. The worst thing about planning is you go through all this effort, we think we've got a really good concept, a really good path to move forward, and then nothing happens. It stays on the shelf. That happens all the time. Again, we've got these things that just sat on the shelf. Nothing ever happened with them. It's a planner's nightmare for something to sit on the shelf. So the plan does recommend some ideas on how to realize this and how to move forward. It identified the Athens Municipal Arts Commission as the obvious organization to be working through. Right now, Carol and the AMAC members, I think we're meeting, is it next Wednesday, Carol? The Arts Commission is going to have a meeting, and our assignment from the last meeting was for all the commissioners to talk about what they think are the top 5 priorities in there, and then that'll help us to try to focus a little bit more on ways to get some of these ideas implemented. We need to continue, or I need to continue working with city departments and elected officials to explain why this stuff really matters and what the benefits are to it. We also need to be exploring public and private partnerships for economic development. A lot of this stuff, it really is economic development. It's not just giving a tax abatement or some sort of a discount to a potential developer. It's about building your community from the ground up, and that should kick in a lot of economic development. We need to get the public involved with our implementation. It recommends that we try to work with students, both at the university level and in the grade schools and other places like that. Work with our nonprofits and our arts organizations. And really, I want to try to encourage ownership of this plan and encourage those ideas out of everybody. It should not be a top-down thing where I'm telling somebody what to do or how to do it. We just want to get everybody's brains thinking a little bit more about ideas and ways to move forward. Lastly, I didn't do too bad there. I want to say thank you to a few people who really worked on this with us, gave a ton of encouragement, and backed us, especially Mayor Paul Weil and Athens City Council. I see several members in here, Jennifer and Michelle and Chris, and Kent, and Jeffrey, and Steve, and Jim, and I think Chris had to leave early. But thank you. There's a quorum. Well, we're all good. We had a planning and design team that did a lot of pro bono work for us on this. No joke, this would be a very expensive consulting project if we had to actually pay somebody to do it. So I really want to give a thank you to Kyle Ezel and his team. I think Josh is with him right there, and Kyle had several other people that helped us on it too. We also had Taylor Welch. He's the OU student who did the paper sketches for us. And then we also, Kyle collaborated with MKSK Design Studio, which is a design studio out of Columbus. And they did a lot of the detailed mock-up work for us. That graphic of, that final graphic of the stairs and of the bike racks and of the uptown garage and a few of the other things in the plan. They gave us all that work for pro bono. And again, that's a lot of work that people put in, a lot of volunteer effort. That people donated to the community of Athens. I'd like to think that we're going to use that service that they gave us and invest it and show that it matters to us as well. I think we've got a great plan here. And finally, I really want to thank the Essence of Athens Ad Hoc Committee. Several of you are in the room right now. I see Patty and Sandra. Two people, unfortunately, have moved from Athens. Alvy McWilliams, a lot of people probably knew Alvy. She moved out to Portland. And Lori Burchett, the former county planner, she moved out to Idaho. John's in here too, John Leffelholtz. Thank you, John. When we started having these meetings and we had this ad hoc committee came together the first night, I think we were in that room for about 3.5 hours. Laughing the whole time, and it was from like 7 at night or 6 at night until almost 10 in the evening, just sitting in the conference room at City Hall, and everybody was so energized. And I know City Council just had a 3.5 hour meeting on Monday, and I watched a little bit of it on TV, and I think we had a lot more fun through the ad hoc committee than you guys might on some nights. This was about as fun as it can get for a planning project. It really is. And for me, I've been with the city for about 6 years now. This is the big stuff. This is that big thinking and that long range stuff with what can we do to improve our community right now and make sure that it continues to improve and continues to be a great place. It's not small stuff at all, and I hope you guys don't think it is, because we can have a huge impact on our community if we start thinking like this, and we can be real change agents, and we can really make sure that Athens is about as awesome as it possibly can be. And I think most of us already think we're in a pretty great spot. So thank you to everybody. Lastly, I wanted to we had some hopes from the plan. And it says, this is some cliff notes of what the actual document says, but we hope that the story of remarkable Athens grabs people's attention when they talk about us and are drawn to us. We hope that this plan features locally inspired design inspirations that can be used to build everyday things such as sidewalks, street signs, public art, homes, businesses, and everything else. Over time, it is our hope that this will leave a lasting impression on our visitors and encourage an even deeper ownership of our community by locals. And I think we did a really good job of that. I really do. Thank you.